different issues there. Now, again, if let's say someone comes in to transact the sale of drugs out of the hotel room. The hotel, going back in all seriousness to that first issue with the prostitute, the hotel can't allow, if they know, prostitution to take place in their hotel. So they'd have to say, no, you can't rent the room. If someone was dumb enough or silly enough to say I'm here to rent this room to commit a crime. If a hotel knows someone's selling drugs out of their room and they don't do anything about it, call the police or do something, there could be some liability or some criminal liability. And the real issue is, this is the first thing Jackie talked about, notice. Does the hotel know what's going on there? Because if someone just rents the room and they see a lot of traffic in and out of that room, and that may raise some issues, now you're getting into a more of a gray area of what responsibility or duty do they have either to call the police or find out, do some investigation on their own.
Themselves. So staying with your example, assuming they do know that drugs are being sold from the room, and somebody has an overdose as a result of buying drugs from that room, can there be some kind of nexus or connection with the hotel?
Right. And I think
because there's your injury, you have an overdose, you have an injury.
Now you have a potential claim with a good lawyer looking at it and saying there's some causal relationship here. So a hotel can set itself up for liability on a negligence claim if it doesn't do something to stop this kind of activity from taking place.
I think we've covered that. That's good. So from flea bag hotels, let's talk about the bed bugs in the hotels. It happens, and it doesn't always mean that they're negligent. Sometimes they are. Cases, do you have specific cases? I do. Do you have specific thoughts of
I think I said before we started that bed bugs are hitchhikers.
Yes.
Okay, so basically what I'm saying is they're portable and they're easily moved from place to place. To say that any one entity is liable, you have to show that, again, were they on notice that there was a problem, okay? Were there any damages as a result? The problem is if you've stayed in 2 places in 1 week, okay, you're traveling across the country, you stayed in which place is liable? How do you know, or if somebody didn't report it until 3 weeks later, how do you know that person didn't get the bugs from a dressing room in TJ Maxx or something like that? So you have to show that, yes, in fact, it came from this facility. And again, back to notice.
Right.
Were they aware that it happened, that this problem existed? Did they do anything to resolve the problem? Okay, your duty of care. And were there any damages as a result? So consequently, let's say, yeah, they're on notice. Take the example further. Person goes home and he develops a terrible rash, or he's still in the hotel, develops this terrible rash, has to go to the emergency room, medical bill. So there you have some damages there.
So, and we can make a hypothetical and really ramp up those damages. The person comes to Rhode Island to perform at the PPAC, and she's getting paid or he's getting paid thousands of dollars a day for the performance. And now because they've developed the rash, the bed bug problems, and are now unable to perform their job, that's all part of the compensatory damages that they might be able to recover for.
And in fact, I think you can even get punitive damages, but you have to show that the entity did something so egregious out of the norm in order to get punitive or punishment damages.
They intentionally
disregarded
a problem and allowed it to happen, knowing that you were going into a room that they had already been told and knew had bed bugs in it and hadn't treated it or done anything about it.
I'm not sure all hoteliers are likely to say, sleep here at your own risk, but in an example, when one woman was traveling on business and she stayed at a Hilton chain, and she was there for 2 nights. After the first night, she was itchy, but by the second night, we realized that she realizes that she has over 150 bed bug bites, and she sues. Is there contributory negligence?
Because she stayed there?
She stayed there that second night. Is there...
That could be a defense, assumption of the risk. I don't know, it could be a defense.
Just like,
it's not as bad as it was.
Just like the plaintiff has to prove that the defendant knew that there was a problem, contributory negligence would require that she had been on notice that the problem she was having was from bed bugs and not from something else. And therefore, by continuing to stay knowing there was a problem, perhaps there is contributory negligence, but I would probably assume in that case she had no idea or she wouldn't have stayed.
Suppose you're working in good faith and you had known that New York had such a spate of this outbreak. So now you assume that they've taken care of it because it's gone on and it was history. Now you go to New York, and sure enough, it happens. You should have known because it was
You had
already,
a problem, you
because it
previously
happened.
had, it happened.
So now it's definitely buyer beware, and now
yeah.
it's definitely at your own risk, or is it
You're
not?
saying it with the same...
With the same
facility?
hotels.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I'm a little troubled by that because you would assume part of the duty the hotel owes you is to give you a clean room.
Yes.
And a clean room to me means a room that doesn't have bed bugs in it.
Yes.
So if they had bed bugs and it's some period of time between the time you're going, you maybe want to ask, what action have you taken to resolve this? But there isn't clear to me that it would be assumption of the risk or contributory negligence to stay there if it's a reputable hotel.
Now, the other theory, too, is with the negligence, you can, if you can't sue on negligence, you may be able to sue on the contract.
Right,
For the
exactly.
violation of the warranty of habitability. So they have a responsibility to make sure that their room is habitable. If it's not habitable because it's infested with bugs or fleas or roaches, seems to be common in some places.
The relationship between the person staying at the
That's
hotel
right.
and the hotel is a contractual one. You make an offer to stay there for a certain amount of money, they accept it, and they give you a room, and part of that contract is you're going to pay, and they're going to provide you a room, as Jackie says, that's fit for the purpose that you're going to use it for, which would be to sleep in without bed bugs.
We talk about this a lot with landlord-tenant issues. You know, tenant's not paying rent, why isn't paying rent? Because they might be, the house might be infested with bugs, and
No hot water.
there's no hot water, so then you have your breach of warranty or habitability. So it's a similar example.
Yep.
Out of curiosity, what's the correlation, if any, between the size of the payout and the staying at a Hilton versus a local Motel 6 when there are bed bugs? Bed bugs still bite you
Right.
and cause the same damage, whether
The
they were...
hitchhikers, they can be anywhere and
Right.
everywhere.
And-
So if it
and
pays out more,
The
does it
name of the
matter?
hotel shouldn't affect
No.
the settlement.
Shouldn't,
Should
does it?
not.
No.
I wouldn't think that it does.
Yeah.
Insurance covers it? That's why...
Yeah,
they
well,
say-
it is,
the same
and
way?
it's really, damages are based on the injury that you suffered. So if you suffered the same injury at a flea bag motel, as you called it, or what's the Regis or something?
Yeah.
St. Regis?
Trump Towers.
Or Trump Towers. We'll go there later.
Good name.
Then the damages are the same. Now, I can't tell you that a jury might not be swayed one way or another, more or less either way, but I can't tell you which way they might be swayed.
Okay, fair enough. A cleaner but nastier bug problem that hotels have now, the data security issue. I expect if I'm using their Wi-Fi free, or if I'm paying for their Wi-Fi, I'm assuming that I should be able to go on the internet, do the business that I need to, and then leave. What happens if it's hacked and you know what happens right then and there? What's the extent, is the hotel liable? How do they control? They couldn't even know where that hacker was coming from.
But if you're going into their Wi-Fi, I'm only thinking that it's probably not a secure network. So
Right.
if you know you're going on an unsecured network, getting back to what David said, you've assumed part of the risk there.
Right.
Okay. But if you're paying to be on a secured network,
Wi-Fi
and you
is
get hacked.
unsecured
Oh, some-
always?
yeah.
Not always, but it
If you're
can be.
paying in a hotel, would it be unsecured? Would you
Well,
expect
if
it
they
to
give
be-
you a password to get in,
Yes.
and you have to have that
you
password, then
assume
you assume it's secured.
secured.
And yet you know that there are very sophisticated hackers who are able to find their way through these things.
Right,
and-
so then you're going to go back to a negligence claim. Did the hotel do something that was negligent in allowing a hacker to get into it? You remember those cases they had where people were stealing credit card information
Yeah.
from stores, maybe it was the TJ Maxx companies or something?
Yes.
And if the stores did something that allowed them to do that easily, and they were negligent in not protecting people against that, then there'd be some liability. If they were doing what any reasonable merchant would do, and it happened, then they're not really liable because it's not strict liability, which means you're liable whether you did something wrong or not. It's negligence. Did you do something different or deviate from a standard of care of a regular, well-intentioned hotel keeper, or in that case, a merchant?
Interestingly, I don't know what the standards are that they're held to, but in Europe, for example, they have another way of handling data security. They use the chip and pin, and surprisingly, U.S. doesn't use it. I imagine that if you had a jury and the jury was incredibly sophisticated or they were well-traveled, they might know, well, that couldn't happen if it were in the middle of France or the middle of London. However, here there's a Wi-Fi. I expect it's secure. I paid my $15.99 or whatever I paid, and there you go. Someone found a way to.
And how the jury would find that out is a good lawyer would say, I've studied this issue. I'm going to bring evidence. There's a way of protecting it. And the hotel may say, well, in the United States, that's not our industry standard.
And there would be,
but that will not protect them.
It will not.
If the industry standard is not good enough, and there's a way to do it, and it's reasonable and not overly expensive, and it could be done, and it's done other places, then just because you meet the industry standard doesn't mean you're going to be free from negligence.
That's very good to know. I think that that's certainly going to do plenty for the data security system networks who want to sell security systems, because it's a very big issue right now. I guess Apple has its own problems.
The example I use with that when I teach this is back in the day, when hotels had beds with mattresses that weren't flame resistant, and flame resistant mattresses existed, and there was a fire and someone could have gotten killed but would have lived had they had the flame resistant mattress,
Yes.
It would not have been a good defense, in my opinion, for the hotel to say, well, it's the hotel industry to use these mattresses, not those mattresses, when those mattresses were available.
Another good point, good example. Most places are smoke-free, and they post it on the lobby, and most people would understand that. What happens now, considering there is an issue about medical marijuana, there's medical aromatic essences and aromas, and what happens then? Are they allowed to say to the patron, I'm sorry, you can't smoke, even though they may be card carrying, I'm allowed to smoke, I need this for my survival, my peace, or whatever. What happens then?
Interesting. But most hotels do have designated smoking floors, or they might say to them, there's a area in the hotel where you can smoke.
Yeah. When you have conflicting rules like that, the rule that's designed to protect the public would overrule the individual's person's right to smoke, so that they have that right to smoke, but they'd have to do it somewhere that doesn't interfere with other people's rights.
So would it be incumbent upon the person who has that medical need to call that place as he's making reservation, these are my circumstances, can you accommodate me or can you not?
Right.
So that would then allow that hotelier to be off the hook, because he at least had the chance to explain, yes, we do, no, we don't.
Right.
Now you can have your druthers and move elsewhere.
Look at it this way. If you have a medical marijuana card and you need it because of pain or whatever, and you're flying across the country, you're not going to be able to light up in the plane no matter what. Right.
In the time that we have left, what about from the employees and secondhand smoke? Even if there's generally a no smoking policy, there may be designated areas. If you happen to be a server in those restaurants or hotels, you are passing through and there's no avoiding it.
I think you definitely have liability there, because they allowed the smoke to continue, knowing that it's toxic. It could have an adverse effect on people.
Right. And this was a secondhand smoke issue that really ignited the whole smoke-free environment in restaurants and bars and workplace.
Interesting. I would think that there is now a better way of handling ventilation, but even at that doesn't mean that it's going to be sufficient, and I guess that's what you're saying, class action suits have happened.
Well, and it was to protect worker safety. I remember there was a restaurant downtown a long time ago when they had first started designated smoking areas, and they had almost like a greenhouse in the middle of the restaurant where you could smoke.
Yeah, or they used to have like a little divider.
Right, which didn't do anything.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes, difficult. Of course, we thank you for tuning in, and I guess we need to point out that there are many state laws that are unique, and you need to review those as the situation comes up. We would say to you, bon appetit, thank you for joining us, and happy travels.